Yesterday, Gold One International announced that all conditions precedent to the acquisition of 100% of Rand Uranium Limited for a purchase price of $250 million have been fulfilled. $137.7 million of the purchase price was settled by Gold One. The balance of $112.3 million is to be settled in either cash, Gold One ordinary shares, or a combination thereof within 90 days of Friday the 6th of January 2012. Gold One has also announced the immediate appointments of Hartley Dikgale and Grant Stewart as Senior Vice President General Counsel and Vice President of Investor Relations respectively. Both Dikgale and Stewart were previously members of the Rand Uranium Executive. Chris Hart, let's start with you. If you were part of Gold One's finance team, which option would you advise them to pursue to settle the remaining $112 million? Would it be cash, shares, or a combination of the two? And what would be the impact of each scenario?
I think this is a company that's quite diluted in terms of the number of shares in issue and the milling rate and that sort of thing. So I would look to cash at this stage. I think at this point the operations, the things that do have strong operations at the moment are quite cash generative, and so I think that's probably the best way at this stage to actually go, so that there's at least, so the dilution factor doesn't come in. The one problem that one has with gold shares is that they keep issuing shares and they dilute, etc. And it's one of the reasons why investors, in a sense, have shifted away from gold shares and gone to gold itself. And I think one needs to make it, potentially over the longer term, as attractive as possible.
Warren, coming to the second news item in the intro, senior corporate appointments. So far this year, there's been one high-profile move by South African mining exec, and that was Harmony's financial director, Hannes Meyer. The former CEO of Rand Uranium, John Munro, will no longer be involved following the completion of this $250 million takeover last week, Friday. But two Rand Uranium execs I've just mentioned now, Mr. Dikgale and Mr. Stewart, are coming on board. Can we speculate on what Mr. Munro will be doing? And while we're at it, what do you make of Metrex's CEO, Terence Goodless, following the takeover by Jinchuan?
I think, first of all, obviously, when you're the acquiring company, you get to choose who you want on the board, and I think the Gold One executive board led by Neil Froneman was nicely settled. It's a team that's been in place for a couple of years already. So those two naturally came on in sort of what you call ancillary types of roles. They're not executive directors. They'll be doing investor relations and group counsel. So from that point of view, it just helps also bed down the acquisition when you have two organizations that are now becoming one. So I think that's obviously beneficial. I have no idea what the ex-CEO of Rand Uranium is going to be up to. And with respect to Terence Goodless, as far as I understood, he was going to be staying on with Metrex following that acquisition. And that's partly because I think the management teams, South African management teams, are quite highly regarded. So when you have an asset that you're investing in, and you're very comfortable with the competence of the team, then naturally you would keep them there. A merger or an acquisition where you're joining two companies like's been done with Rand Uranium and Gold One is slightly different, and that's where you do see senior executives peeling off to go their own way.
Thanks, Warren. Chris, Gold One's Modder East mine is a flagship operation, and it differentiates itself from other gold mines in South Africa because of its shallow nature, between 300 and 500 meters below the surface. What is the expected output and the impact of Modder East mine's operations on Gold One's numbers going forward?
I think this is the anchor. Without Gold One would struggle without Modder, the Modder operations. Effectively, the shallowness helps to keep costs down. It also is a lot safer, and so from those kind of risks, it's easier from from an investor point of view, where safety has become quite a critical issue in terms of how mine performance actually is over the longer term. The risk of safety-related stoppages is in fact lower. The lower cost means that it's extremely cash generative and can be over the time, and it's got reasonable grades as well. And from that, from that whole combination, it looks like a decent operation. But clearly, that it's not their only operation. They are looking at expanding and developing other operations like Sub-Nigel. There's a couple of green and brownfields operations in the Free State, and that. So ultimately, it's still going to be, consuming a lot of that cash while they develop these other operations.
Looks like Warren wants to add a point to what Chris has just said.
Yes.
Yeah, just to add in, we just ran the numbers and we were talking about this off air before the show. The Modi East mine that Gold One currently owns, we've just seen that they've reported production figures for the last year, which was 123,000 ounces, which was above the target of 120,000 ounces. In terms of the uranium acquisition, it's going to add almost another 150,000 ounces to their production profile. Mm-hmm. So they're soon going to be over 300,000 ounces a year, which makes them a mid-tier producer. But what's incredible at the moment is if you look at the costs of that Modi East mine, just some of the numbers, comparisons I did based on 2010 figures, they produce an ounce of gold at $484 an ounce, which is one of the lowest in the industry, almost worldwide. When you convert that into a rand price, in terms of the rand price per kilogram that they receive, they're receiving about 425,000 rand a kg of gold at the current exchange rate. And their costs, it's costing them 126,000 rand a kg. So the margin is about 300,000 rand a kg at the moment, which is indicative of other gold producers in South Africa, which have the same effect with the rand becoming weaker.
I really, really hate to cut you short, Warren, but I want us to say the discussion on the outlook for gold in 2012 for the end of the show. Okay. Right now I need to get your vote for Gold One. Hot or not for you? Let's start with you, Warren.
Yes, it is hot. I like the production profile going forward.
You like the production profile. Chris, you're echoing that sentiment.
It is. There's growth in the stock and there's at least a decent core operation to ensure its sustainability.
Well, as I said, I didn't mean to cut you short there, Warren. I know spot gold's been moving in a tight range of less than $20, above 1,600 for the last 3 days because of this whole New Year euphoria, but it quickly faded on worries of Eurozone debt. We're going to touch on the outlook for gold, as I said. Let's move on now to Pan-African Resources. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Great. Pan-African Resources released a further cautionary announcement at the end of last year and announced changes to its board of directors. Warren, I want to start with this cautionary announcement because obviously when something like that comes out on SENS, the first thing is, what is it about? And of course, no one knows what it's about. Can we speculate that it's got something to do with the Mozambican listing?
It could do. I suspect they're gonna peel that off. Obviously, that Manica gold deposit, but I think the activity is really around local operations. And when you throw a couple of these small to mid producers together, there's been a lot of talk of consolidation in the industry. Some people on rumor have talked about Gold One and Pan-African, perhaps pulling DRD into it. So I think it's got more to do with consolidation in the local gold industry than it has to do with the Manica deposit.
Chris, could you give us your comment on consolidation in the local gold industry?
Yeah, well, I think there's still scope for consolidation. I think in a sense of moving assets around to house them in more logical kind of ways. I think with the gold price where it is, there's a lot of interesting restarts that can come into play, which of course when you look at existing assets, one would look at that to see where one could get leverage, who owns them, etc. And I still think that there's going to be a shake-up. I know DRD's, for instance, got their Blyform mine is up for sale, for instance. They're trying to position themselves as a surface operation and move the Blyform out of off their balance sheet, but they've still got considerable potential for underground operations. They've still got the mothballed ERPM mine, for instance, that can also be sold off, and I would imagine Gold or Gold One or one of these could actually be quite interested in that as an operation if there's sufficient interest in restarting these operations.
Warren, we started the show with Gold One, and they're not the only one who have had executive reshuffles. Pan-African has also had some reshuffles with people from the Shanduka Group.
Yeah.
Cyril Ramaphosa stepped down as chairman. Busi
Yep.
Sutole is replacing Kobus Lutz as the chief financial officer, and Puti Malawi, who's the CEO of Shanduka, is taking on the responsibility of deputy non-exec chairman. Is this cross-pollination healthy, given the fact that Shanduka is the majority shareholder of Pan-Africa, or is it just a fair protection of shareholders' interests?
I think it's a fair protection of shareholders' interests. Busi's been with the company a while, as far as I understand. The previous FD was Kobus Lutz, and he was almost on loan from the Shanduka Group to sort of help Pan-African. So I understand that he's just gone left to concentrate his efforts in the Shanduka Group, Shanduka Resources Group, to spend his full time there. So it's just allowing more capacity, I think creating more capacity. You know, Pan-African's now not just a one mine show, it's also got the platinum operation. It's talking about doing different things with Manica, so you need a full-time FD there.
I want to get your comment, Warren, on
yeah.
that move into platinum. Does it signal a shift of like a change of focus away from gold?
It does, but they did talk about being a precious metals group. If you look at their strategy, their mission statement, it's to be a very profitable precious metal group. And to be fair, the Barberton mines came along opportunistically. They bought it from Metrex at a very good price. They saw a similar thing happening here with this opportunity to develop the Phoenix Platinum plant, which is a chrome tailings retreatment plant. So yeah, I think it actually makes the company quite interesting, because it gives you a nice sort of hedge between industrial demand and precious metals demand, where gold is precious metals and works on fear. Platinum is more industrial. So it kind of hedges the company quite nicely, and it makes it quite an interesting investment on the local bourse.
Chris, it seems like you're agreeing with Warren on that last note.
I think small-scale platinum producers face huge challenges, and it's more metallurgical risk than anything else. And if one actually looks at the platinum industry, yes, you have a few that are doing well, but the ones that really do well are still the you could say big two and maybe third with Lonmin, Anglo Platinum, and Impala. These smaller ones often run into problems, and that's why it makes a peculiar mix, in the sense that does it fit the profile of a die-hard gold investor or a platinum investor, or does it fit the profile of somebody who would invest in platinum, who would naturally gravitate more to Anglo Plat, and because of the certainty and stability of the operations. This is still got to be tested. And we've seen, you know, startups come and that are still struggling, and they've never really broken into it, etc. Northam is, I think, the only one that has managed, if I could say, patchy record. But it did come with big mining house backing at the time. That was Goldfields of South Africa, you know, that helped to set it up. This is slightly different, and I can't help thinking it could be warehoused in two separate bodies to actually satisfy the needs of both investors.
Warren, before we go to hot or not, I couldn't help feeling that this listing of the Manica Gold project in Mozambique is slightly reminiscent of the PSG model. Now, besides raising capital for Pan-African through the listing, what is the motivation behind spinning it off?
Well, I think there's a few, and I'm not an expert on geological matters by any stretch, but I understand that the gold that they mine there is refractory, so it would require a specific treatment plant to deal with that
the refractory ore.
With that refractory ore. I just forget the name of the actual plant that they need to build there. It's called a Biox plant to treat refractory ore. So it's a little bit metallurgically challenged, I think is the right word. It's also in Mozambique. It's kind of far away from their operations.
And Mozambique is not really known as a mining country. I mean, despite the fact that they're having successful negotiations with the Ministry of Mining in Mozambique, it's not really a place that you would immediately think, oh, Mozambique, mining.
Supplies and the infrastructure to support the industry is from South Africa still.
Look, I think it's from the infrastructure point of view, it's right near the border with Harare. There's a road that runs through it, and if you're ever interested in drinking beer, you can drive that road and go and buy the local Mozambican beer. But Mozambique's improving as a mining destination with the coal deposits in the Tet province. So I'm not too worried about that. I just think this is a hell of a project that they'd have to concentrate on, and they'd rather just participate as a sort of junior shareholder rather than taking the operational risk of trying to deliver this project, because I think it does have some challenges, and you kind of get the sense that if they haven't delivered this project before, they need to do so, let someone else do it. So I think that's the view there.
Let's get your vote on Gold One then as a share for you, Warren, hot or not?
Pan-African, I'm hot.
Oh,
I'm still hot in Pan-African.
Pan-African.
Yeah, I am as well. I think there's a lot of opportunity. This is still a company that can come up with quite surprising deals within the industry, and I think it's well positioned to do that. It's I think it's Barberton operations, 100,000 ounce producer. It does have some substance to it, quite good grades as well. I think it's a hot little stock.